So you know it's not a crime to be fascinated by all things criminal. And if you do like delving into the underworld, why not join us for a special live show on March 27th at the Cork Opera House? We'll be talking about the making of a cartel and all the wild and crazy stories that happened along the way. So why not join us for this special live show? Tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie.
The compo cases are nearly always colourful, but I suppose this one reads extra colourful. And it involves a woman called Kathleen Wall, who we've mentioned before in connection with cab cases brought against her husband. Kathleen Wall has a long-running case, nearly a decade old, is it, at this stage, against South Dublin County Council over a trip. And she certainly seemed to struggle to find a lawyer, she was telling the court.
Yeah, this goes back to an alleged trip and fall in South Dublin in 2015, I think it was. So she's taken a high court case for it. She claims she suffered serious injuries. She tripped and fell on, I think it was an exposed cover that she says South Dublin County Council are disputing this, so that's why it's going to hearing.
Yeah, they gave a colourful comment, I suppose, in court about what did they say? They said the only thing Mrs. Wall is who she says she is.
Yeah,
nothing else is agreed in terms of the fall.
Yeah. They said that everything is that dispute in this case. So you have two different sides. Defence and plaintiff have very different opinions on which is correct. So they say, yeah, we dispute everything in this case other than Mrs. Wall is who she says she is. Nothing else is agreed.
So I suppose one of the reasons that it would have caught your attention is that she wanted to bring her son as a witness who she said was present. And obviously her son is somebody we've written about, and her husband, in connection with what the guards call the Cockwall organised crime gang.
Yeah.
Obviously Kathleen Wall is not a member or not suspected of any involvement in any of that criminality. However, her husband is, probably one of the country's more notorious criminals.
Yeah, he's Edward Ned Wall. He's described as the leader by Gardaí. They've named him as the leader of this Cockwall gang, along with his brother John. They would have been, notorious for these kind of crimes all across the country, where they're travelling down, breaking into houses, going for high value targets. In some cases, it might be, the thing that Ned is in for, or Ed is currently in for, is a 20 grand jewellery robbery in Killiney there during COVID.
Yeah.
It was kind of a high profile case. Patrick's actually in for the same thing, so it's a bit of
This is her son Patrick, yeah.
Her son Patrick, sorry, yeah, who she wants to call as a witness. So him and his father, Edward, both were caught after this. They were under surveillance by Gardaí, who would have been targeting that gang, so they had them under surveillance at the time. Them and other relatives targeted this house, went in, took 20 grand worth of jewellery, came out, guards chased after them, arrested them. So they're in for various sentences.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the case. It was a kind of a big operation, because it wasn't a case that they came across them or somebody phoned in. They were
under surveillance.
Yeah, they were.
It was the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau were tailing them, essentially. So the Cockwall would be very much on the radar of Gardaí. Like Ned, for instance, he would have had a 3 million cab. They said they owe 3 million in tax, income tax. After a cab investigation. So you're talking about big business if that's what's going on. So this wouldn't be the first time members of the family have been arrested in similar type of operations. So it was
under lockdown, wasn't it? And then there was, I remember it, I think it was a Saturday, and then one of the guys, as the police burst in, presumably with their guns and all, started shouting, "He's got COVID."
That's right, yeah. And this was at the height of kind of COVID. I think it was before the vaccines were around and all that. So it was a bit more of a big deal then than we look at now.
Yeah, people thought of
there was a lot more
a death sentence.
There was a lot more fear about it at the time, but he had COVID. So when they appeared in court, then the guards, I think, all had to get tested and everything. But then when they appeared in court, they had to come in after each of the members of the family and kind of fumigate the court, and do all that disinfectant spray and everything, So it was a bit the actual district court appearance, where they normally would only take a few minutes where they're charged. Took ages, because they kept having to clear the court, disinfect it, everything else like that.
So Edward, he's 53, Kathleen's husband and her son, they were both jailed in connection with that offence, was it?
They were, yeah. So Edward, he got 4 years sentence for it. Patrick got 3.5 with 12 months suspended for the same thing.
Yeah. So obviously then he's in prison, we presume still in prison at this point in connection with that. His mother, she's bringing this case, and so normally these compo cases, you obviously have a solicitor and a barrister to represent you, but she seems to have, according to her, from her own mouth, run into a lot of difficulty finding somebody to back her up.
Yeah, she previously had a solicitor. Lorraine Stevens was her solicitor acting for her, but Lorraine Stevens came off record last year in it, so kind of citing irreconcilable differences. Essentially, she basically swore an affidavit to the court, Miss Stevens, that she didn't feel that Miss Wall was listening to the advice of the solicitors, and the indications were she was in fact acting in contrary to that advice.
Yeah.
So that solicitor came off record and said, look, I don't want to proceed with this case because of these issues.
So she's in there, and it's not clear if she's representing herself or not, or she's...
Well, in a way it is like she was representing herself because she said she couldn't get a solicitor. So she said she tried to get more solicitors after Lorraine Stevens, but said she couldn't find anyone to take the case essentially for her. So she was in there as a lay litigant, which anyone can do. If you're taking a high court case, you can represent yourself at it. That's fine. Now, it's probably more difficult for anyone if they don't know the law fully to go in there and present their own case. But essentially, that's what is. If she can't get a solicitor, which she doesn't seem to be able at the moment, that's what she'll have to do, is present that case. So it was due to start last week on it, but there was a few things she didn't have ready.
Yeah, because you can represent of course you can. I think it's a constitutional right to represent yourself, but you still have to do the legal stuff.
Yes,
like you can't just
boxes have to be ticked.
You can't just get up and sort of say what you want to say. You still have to file documents. So that's one of the problems she ran into. And then the other problem where she wanted to bring her son in, and she said, one of my witnesses is my son, who was 12 at the time. He is in custody at the moment. It's only for a Mickey Mouse offence, she told the court, which might be arguable.
Well, yeah, but it's all about perspective, isn't it?
I suppose it is. But so, like, what difficulties did she run into when she...
Well, the main difficulty she had straight away when she went in is that when you're taking a case like this, you'll put in your pleadings. So you'll basically say what happened to you. You'll put in, like, this is what happened. These are the injuries I suffered. You accompany it with different documents, medical documents, all sorts of stuff to back it up. So it's basically, here's my case. You're handing all these documents over to people. You have to swear an affidavit of verification on that.
Yeah.
Which is just basically to say everything in this is true. It's all above board. This is what happened to me. I you know, so it's the same as getting on a witness stand, swearing on a Bible and saying, I swear to tell the truth. You're just putting that in a paper format. It has to be signed by a solicitor or a commissioner of oaths.
Yeah.
That's it. Simple enough thing. You say everything and this is true, and off you go. No, unfortunately, Miss Wall didn't have that with her on the day, despite being, the defence had written to her, I think they said 10 times in the run-up to it to remind her, and constantly told her she needed this. Now, she told the court that she didn't read or write, and that she relied on her kids to kind of explain things to her that would come out in documents and stuff like that. Now, on the defence's side, they said, well, she seems to understand from all this correspondence. She's turned up to every single court case, so she knows from the letters that she has to turn up, but she doesn't seem to know about the affidavit, was their argument. But despite this, now the judge did give her time to get the affidavit. Initially she said if she wanted to try and do it over lunch on the day she was in court there last week, she could do that. But then she did come back and say she went over to the Keys, but all the solicitors were on lunch.
And she described her injuries, of course, in the course of it as well, didn't she? She said, I mean...
Briefly, yeah. She said, I'm an injured person for 7 or 8 years. I've been paralysed in one hand. She said it's really affected her life, and then asked who's going to take the blame, and then told the court she didn't know what was going on. So she seems to say she's injured her hand very badly. There'll be more details, I suppose, when the full case comes before the High Court.
But it's highly disputed, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah. So they're saying they completely disputed, and she's saying it happened. So the court will decide at the end of the day who's correct and who's not.
Yeah. Judges are very individual when you go before them. Sometimes I've seen them with lay litigants look frustrated, or sometimes they can be quite understanding or help them along. How was that interaction?
Yeah, well, in fairness to the judge, she was very patient. It was Miss Justice Brett was presiding over the case, very patient with Miss Wall. Like there was various points at the court where essentially Miss Wall was asking the judge for legal advice, which you obviously can't do. The judge did explain this to her numerous occasions, and and that's what I mean. It's how patient she was. She said, "Look, I can't give you legal advice. You have been asking me for a lot of it." Yeah. That's not how it works. I'm essentially like the referee in a match. I'm not here to provide legal advice. I think at one point she might have asked the defence for legal advice as well, and they also explained to her they couldn't provide that, unfortunately, for her, obviously. So I think she might have had a little bit of difficulty, Miss Wall, in understanding that it was her case and she was bringing it forward.
Right.
At different points in it, she said, well, what if I can't get anyone to defend me? And it was pointed out she's not defending herself, she's bringing the case. It was the counsellor there defending themselves.
Probably more used to this.
So I don't think she struggled with the kind of ins and outs of how the court process would work, and then said that herself, like, look, I don't know what's going on here.
And how do you get your witness from prison? I mean, you can get witnesses from prison.
Yeah, well, you can, and you see, it's probably normally easier when you have a legal team that can do it. So you'd have to, request it to the prison governor and say, I have a case. You look for a production order for the prisoner and say that they've been subpoenaed to court to appear on this day to give evidence in this case. So if Kathleen is listening, I suppose maybe she might want to do that before the case comes up later this month.
Okay, well, we'll come back and see how it all works out for No Doubt at the end of the month. So thanks, Alan.
No bother.
If you're a crimeworld.com subscriber, you've probably already binged on our latest exclusive podcast series, The Regency 10 Years On, from the hit that changed gangland forever. This 6-part anniversary special revisits that fateful day when David Byrne was shot dead at the Northside Hotel, igniting a bloody feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, one of the deadliest rivalries in Irish history. Here's a taste of the new series, exclusive to crimeworld.com subscribers. So that Friday was one of those really quiet days. I mean, we all knew that Daniel Kinahan was in Dublin for the Clash of the Clans boxing weigh-in. At least we knew he was due into Dublin the next day. That Clash of the Clans bout match had been heavily advertised. But the day itself there was just little going on.
So there was very little happening that day. It's February. It's kind of a quiet enough time for news in general. And Alan Cherry and Ernie Leslie were on the road. They were at another story, actually, in Finglas.
What was that, do you remember?
Well, it was one of these classic sort of district court stories where a guy I think some teenagers had thrown stones at his car and he got out and slapped the teenager. Always great kind of human stories because some people feel sorry for the teenagers and some people don't. And so Alan had been out there, but the guy had moved on. He'd called out to his house to see if he wanted to talk. He'd moved on, he wasn't there. And we discussed going to the Regency earlier. And I said, look, just go along and see what happens, divert there. We obviously weren't expecting anything. And obviously that point of Alan being there would be the subject of conspiracy, but we'll get into that at a later point.
For sure. So it was a case really that day of, one thing hadn't worked out, so go to the next. But also there was definitely a general sense of, if we could be there, just in case.
Yes, and as you said, to see who was standing beside the Kinahans and who wasn't from that bigger organised crime group. So Alan and Ernie went out. I got a call. I think you got a call almost simultaneously, but I got a call from Alan. I'd spoken to him earlier on the day saying, see what happens. And he phoned me up and said, there's after been a shooting and I think we've got a picture. And I actually went, yeah, very funny. But of course, he stopped me and said, no, I'm serious. There's some guys come out with a gun, there's shots fired and there's total and utter chaos. And, our first thought is, get yourself safe. I have to admit, my second thought was, I hope they did get good pictures. But, you're still thinking they have to get safe. I mean, I know you probably got a similar call because Ernie and Alan obviously were in the same Jeep.
And of course, Ernie's the guy taking the photographs,
yes.
So he's on the phone to me. So I actually had gone for a pizza for lunch and I had come back over to the office and the phone rings and it was Ernie. And I answered and he was panicked on the other end of the phone. This was real high octane stuff. And he's still trying to take photos. He's trying to tell me what's happened. He's told me he thinks he's got a good one of one of the shooters as they were running from the scene. He was trying to call up the photograph on the back of his camera because it would have taken him a while to get it onto a screen, but he'd also sent it into the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was kind of in the middle of doing a number of things. And as I was on the phone to him from memory, the photograph came into the office and we put it up on the big screen. And it was clear to see that this wasn't just one of the shooters as he suspected, but it was two. One of them was dressed as a woman.
Which is, of course, there was also this confusing story about guards coming in with weapons, and obviously we know now that they weren't ERU guys, they were guys dressed as them. But Alan was telling me this, there was talk of these guards, and then obviously there was, the crowd fleeing from the scene. So it was all confusing. But as you said, Ernie had taken a picture of the back of his camera. People will know what the photographer's cameras look like, and they have a little digital screen. You don't see it in great detail, but we knew this is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph has been gotten.
Yeah, as soon as it came in. And of course, look, the newsrooms aren't as busy as they used to be. They used to be very busy, buzzy places with phones ringing everywhere. And it felt like a proper newsroom that day. I remember everybody's phone was going. People were hearing little bits about it. The news was starting to break about it. And of course, we were there sitting in the office with this photo. There's that sort of news sense in you that you want to run this.
Yeah.
And at the time, we weren't putting stuff up online. This would have been held for the paper on the Sunday, and this is a Friday afternoon. We had something really special here. But we also, I think, knew the guards were going to be desperate for that picture because they were two gunmen running from a scene of a crime. So it was a very compromised situation, and there was a bit of arguments going on, and there was voices were raised.
Totally. I mean, because it is complex. I mean, normally the journalism likes to keep itself separate from the Gardaí investigations. So Garda investigations go on and journalism reports on them. But obviously then you're put in this compromising position because you have guys running out visibly with handguns in their hands. And, they're obviously then disappeared into the ether. And you have to have a discussion about what is your civic responsibility in terms of, do you help the guards? You don't want these armed gunmen to run down the street and kill another few people. So it was a complex one, and people were aware straight away that the guards are going to want these pictures and want to use it for their purposes. And we also have our purposes, which is to tell what happened and to report on the news. So there was a conflict straight away.
From my memory, as the afternoon went on and I was talking to contacts and to other people who were involved in crime journalism, etc., it became apparent that there were no guards at the weigh-in. That in actual fact, the guards didn't seem to be there at all. They were called literally by the hotel and had arrived in response to what had already gone on. Of course, David Byrne had been shot dead in the reception of the hotel. We were getting photographs in later in the day, which showed a very shocked-looking Liam Byrne standing outside the hotel, his hands in his pockets, standing beside his cousin Liam Rowe, another significant cartel member. There was no sign of Daniel Kinahan. I was getting calls from people who were telling me that these professional killers had been flown into the country and had already been flown out. There was rumours, there was spin, and also there was the general, I suppose, conversations in regards to, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I mean, all anyone knew for sure was something was going to happen. David Byrne was a very, very senior lieutenant. He was also from criminal royalty from the Byrne family. His brother-in-law is Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. You know, his brother is Liam Byrne, and he's very much at the heart of the Kinahan cartel. We knew from the beginning that this attack had occurred as part of the rivalry between the Kinahan and Hutch factions of what was once the one organisation. And I think everybody was really trying to predict what this might lead to, but nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. And of course, those rumours straight away went around. It was straight away focused on the Hutch gang. But at this time, if you remember, while there had been other incidents, for example, an attempted hit on Jerry Hutch in Lanzarote, it wasn't, those incidents weren't always public. People were straight away thinking this isn't the type of normal organised crime operation. They were looking at the weapons, saying, is there a paramilitary organisation involved here? Nobody knew fully. And of course, what people did fear straight away was, no matter what, people knew how big and how powerful the Kinahans had become, and the likelihood of them not striking back was inevitable. That blood was going to flow.
That bit absolutely 100%. But at that very early stage, I recall contacts of mine suggesting that the Hutches were an army. Did they have the backing of the dissidents? Was this going to, were they going to be very heavily armed? Because of that, they had contacts in the north. It was like as if people were trying to size up how two Premiership teams were going to play against one another. That's what it felt like. You've been listening to an extract from The Regency, 10 years on from the hit that changed gangland forever. Visit crimeworld.com and subscribe to hear the full series now. And you'll also get exclusive access to our other podcast deep dives on the Dapper Don, Christy Kinahan, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and more.